everybody, and welcome to Industry Night with me, Nycci Nellis, the show that takes you on a deep dive into the happenings of the hospitality industry. Every week, I get to talk to an incredible array of so talented people and about their passions or professions. Get to do that all here. So, happy 2024. A little bit about me, if it's your first time here. I've been covering the food, beverage, and hospitality scene for over 20 years now through a variety of outlets. I've got print, online, TV, radio, podcast, social, and now YouTube. So you know the list, areyouwantit.com, the online zine that tells you about every restaurant happening. Restaurant openings, food and wine promos, all the happenings around the city. It's all happening for you there. Every Sunday, you tune into Foodie And The Beast, DC's only food, wine, and radio variety show. We just celebrated 15 years. Of course, you follow me at NYCCINELLIS on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Thread, LinkedIn, YouTube, all the platforms. I'm everywhere. So I don't know if you noticed, but I'm taking it a little bit slow for the month of January. I wanted some time for a bit of a refresh. And, I've really been thinking about Industry Night this year and how fortunate I've been to be able to share such incredible stories from people who really do the work. I mean, it's such an honor for me because I'm just a conduit for those stories to actually come out. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to some of the shows from this year or you've heard one or two, I really advise you to go back. There were some just amazing ones, and I'm just so grateful. Now, if you listen to the show on a podcast platform, I thank you. But you can also see what we're doing on YouTube, which just totally changes it for me. It makes it so much fun because, adding the YouTube component allows you to see what's actually happening. And plus I had all these fun residencies. I was at the WineLair, at the Point, and at the Watermark Hotel. It just allows for so many different interactions. And I don't know, what can I say, man? But so much more in 2024, right? More and more and more in 2024. And that actually starts with my guest today. So okay, you hear me talk about my other show, Foodie and the Beast, all the time. It's been on for 15 years, yada, yada, yada. I know you know. But, in my 15 years of doing that show, I really have had mostly amazing shows. And I'm not just saying that because it's my show. It feels good. The vibe is great. Once in a while, a guest gets nervous or struggles, but it's usually salvageable. Yeah, except for this one time. Well, a few months ago, Emma Jagoz, this incredible first-generation organic vegetable farmer who founded Moon Valley Farm, was on. And she was on. She's such an amazing story. And every other guest on that show, just did not bring it that day. And I just felt like Emma's terrific story got totally overshadowed by the fact that nobody else was bringing it in studio. And I was disappointed and angry. I'm still a bit angry about it. But listen, we could talk about media training or being ready for an interview on another day. Actually, I think I'm going to do a quick little video on that. All right, stay tuned. I'm going to put a pin in that. But anyway, so I was hoping Emma would not hold that against me when I asked her to join me on this show, because Moon Valley Farm is this year-round certified organic vegetable farm. It's got an online farmers market, it is home delivery, it's got a CSA, and not only does she service many of the Michelin-starred restaurants that you dine in this city, but she also helps school systems. Anyway, she's got a lot of stuff going on, so Emma's going to join us in just a second. Now, I've been out and about because I can't help myself, and there's so many good places to go. So I'm just going to list off a couple of these places that you should definitely be putting on your own list. So I want to start with Amparo Fondita. This is Christian Iravan. He is a Mexican chef. He has finally opened up his own place. It is a little tiny restaurant, which there are so few of these days, in DuPont Circle. And he's really serving the cuisine of Mexico City. Real authentic flavors, amazing products, and the food just really sings. I did hit the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington's holiday party. They always do it in January. Oh my God, so much fun. So many great people. It's like a prom for me because I know like so many people there and everybody gets to reconnect and it's just great. And then late night, we went to Old Ebbitt. So if you are struggling like after 10 o'clock for where to go for a really good meal late at night, Old Ebbitt totally has your number. And I have to tell you, we walked in at like 10:30 in the evening and I was shocked because the place was pulsating and packed. And it was perfect. So keep that in your back pocket. You're welcome. I had friends in town and I wanted to do a high tea. So we wound up at the St. Regis, which does a really glorious afternoon tea. It's a totally guilty pleasure of mine. If you know me or if you've listened to me, you know I am like a tea fanatic. I have my cup of tea right here, but I love sitting down for an hour or two and eating the scones and the little sandwiches. I mean, honestly, it's all about the clotted cream. I just really want the clotted cream and some really good tea. I know people drink champagne at these things. I don't really get it. I don't understand why I'm supposed to hold a glass of champagne and a cup of tea, but you do you. I'll do me. I'll stick with my tea. I stopped at Immigrant Food at the Planet Word Museum. And if you haven't been to the Planet Word Museum, do not think it's just for little ones because it really isn't. It's a fabulous and beautiful museum, very well curated. And Immigrant Food is in the property. And I don't know, I just wasn't expecting a lot from it. I know I'm not supposed to say that, but I really wasn't. The food is delicious. It has a beautiful setup. It is a great place for lunch, and I will totally be back. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about Ruben Garcia and Casa Teresa. I know I discussed it probably back in November when it first opened, but I did go back. I actually did a chef's tasting menu in front of the kitchen. It has this massive oven because it's all fire. All the dishes are put in the fire. So like last night when it was frigid, we were all sitting in front of the fire and just watching the show, the chefs. The food is delicious. Everything he's doing there is amazing. Check out my Instagram posts for both Casa Teresa and the tea at the St. Regis and Amparo Fondito. It'll answer all your questions. Okay, now on to Emma Jagoz. She's of Moon Valley Farm. Emma grew Moon Valley from as a one woman show, just taking a quarter acre for 12 people. And now she's got like 20 people working for her. She's got 70 acres. She's feeding thousands. So, hi, Emma. There you are. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you on the show, and it's good to see you. So, let's sort of talk about how you got into farming because you weren't planning on making this a job, right? Like, this is just something you wanted to do.
Yeah, so I started growing food for the very first time when I was pregnant with my firstborn when I was 23 years
Hmm.
old.
Okay.
I, yeah, so I hadn't grown anything before then and never ever considered the career of farming before that moment. I
Hmm.
started growing arugula and a couple tomatoes on my apartment balcony because I read that arugula was really great for baby brain development. And
Oh,
I really wanted to develop my baby's brain. I thought, well, this is a one-shot deal. Let's do a good job.
but like
um,
arugula is so delicate. Like when I
mhm.
think of arugula, and what were you doing with it? Were you putting it in baby food?
No, so I was still pregnant. I was just eating it raw in
Oh, okay.
salads or on top of dishes, on top of, a scramble, or even maybe putting it in smoothies.
Hmm.
But I really latched on to that. And when I started growing my own, I thought, oh my God, this food tastes so much better than even the arugula I can get at the grocery store. What's going on with this? Uh, and when I started growing food, I started looking at seed catalogs, and the seed catalogs have these varieties of vegetables and fruits in there that I had never seen before. And so I started trying all these new specialty vegetables, and I started growing a lot more in a garden. And by the time I had my second child, 16 months after my first, I thought,
Okay.
I thought, I want to both raise my kids and work. And so I was trying to figure out what business I could start. And I thought, well, why not expand on my hobby of vegetable gardening and start a CSA program. My sister had told me about the community supported agriculture program that she was a part of in Vermont at the time. And I thought that is the coolest concept. I love it. It's going to be perfect. I can raise my kids and grow a big garden. And so I borrowed a 1/4 acre and started Moon Valley Farm in 2012.
Okay. That's such a, like, you were inspired, and I love that. But so how did you decide what you wanted to grow? I mean, you're like, okay, I'm going to do a CSA. I mean, did you ask people questions? Were you like, what would you like? Or were you like, this is what I want. This is what I want to feed my children. And this is what I'm going to plant. So how did you make those decisions? And I apologize. I lit some sage because I love the smell, and it just like caught on fire. So there's a little bit of smoke in my office.
Well, I hope it still smells good.
It smells delicious, but I mean, I am clearing out any bad vibes. Like, they are
Perfect.
gone.
Well, to answer your question, it was a combination of both growing what I was confident that I could grow and asking the just 12 people that I was growing for what they're interested in. And I kind of went for it if I thought I could grow it. So I latched on to Elliot Pullman, who's an organic vegetable farmer in Maine, and he's put out some really great books as resources for farmers. And I read all his stuff and kind of mimicked his farming style. And
What does that mean? What was his style? What about his style was appealing to you?
It's producing a lot of food organically on a really small scale using human powered tools for the most part. So, rakes, broad forks, small, little tillers and things like, all that you can maneuver without having a tractor or a lot of, expensive equipment. And so when I started the farm, I started with only $300. And so the appeal of hand tools really spoke to my budget.
I bet. And how did you decide on what you were like, first year, first yield? What were you planting? And I would love to know, like, some of the successes, like when you look back in 2012, like, what were some of the successes and what were some of the failures?
There were a lot of both. When you plant for a CSA program, you are going for giving 12 people at the time a really mixed variety of vegetables each week throughout the growing season. So in that season, I was committing to I think a 20 or maybe a 22-week season from June through October. And so each week I had promised people about 8 ripe different veggies. So I was constantly planting things like radishes and salad mix and turnips, beets and carrots. And then I was taking care of longer season crops like tomatoes and eggplant and potatoes. And I had some failures in terms of quantities where
Sure.
I planted way too many tomatillos. I think that first year they got a ridiculous amount of tomatillos in their share. And, I learned what I needed to plant more of. I think that's a huge part of the learning curve in being a farmer is how big are your successions? Because sometimes you get really ambitious and plant, 200 feet of romaine lettuce. And then you realize that's enough lettuce for, a wedding, but you only have 12 people. And so really dialing in those was a big learning curve in the beginning.
I bet. And then what was it? Did people find out, like, which came first, your expansion or people's, like, how did it grow?
The farm has grown from that 12-person, 20-year program to over
Mhm.
600 people with a year-round program, mostly from word of mouth. And I am just humbled and awed and delighted how people will share about us to their friends and family. Over the years,
But
we've
so,
tried, yeah,
oh no, I was going to ask, like, but so people started asking about you. So the need was there, right? So you're like, oh my God, I gotta grow some more veggies because more people want to join the CSA. So
yeah.
how do you go about? So now at this point, you don't need to borrow the land; you need to buy land. So how did you do that? How did you find the land you wanted? How did you make sure that the soil was healthy? How did you teach yourself that? I mean, there's a lot of talk about regenerative agriculture, and I know that's a key point for you. Like, can we talk through that a little bit? Because I know that helps fuel everything you're doing.
Absolutely. I think my position as a parent and an organic farmer, really both starting around the same time, has informed my decisions really strongly throughout the whole farming process. You know, I started growing food for my baby's health, right?
Hmm.
And so being really careful about the inputs I put into growing that food has been of utmost importance from the very beginning. I didn't want to put anything in the soil that I didn't trust my toddler crawling around in, because they were actually crawling around in the
Yeah,
soil
right.
when I was putting it in right there. You can see pictures from back in the day where, I mean, my kids were all over my body all the time. And
Hmm.
as I'm bending in the soil or hoeing a row while baby carrying. So I really wanted to make sure that I wasn't using any sprays or putting any amendments into the soil that could harm my child. And of course, I didn't want anything in my kitchen that I wasn't, or in anyone's kitchen that I wouldn't put in my own. So,
Hmm.
and at the same time, as a grower, you really can't make it if there's massive holes in your produce, or if there's a lot of if people find slugs in their salad, they're not going to come back for more salad.
Right.
So I did have to really learn a lot of organic methods to make sure that my food was not only really safe, but also high quality and like really grocery store quality, better than grocery store quality,
Hmm.
a better shelf life, a better flavor, and also not looking holy and looking how people expect produce to come.
So
So,
so what does that mean? Like, how do you do that? Like, I'll never forget, I have a friend who uh is into collecting mushrooms and morels, and I am the lucky receiver, like, because I get so many and I
ooh,
get
yeah.
bags of like those champagne morels, in the spring. But I'll never forget one time, like, I took the morels out to rinse them and I saw like a little buggy crawl out. I was like, oh my God, I was not expecting that. But that's what
Hmm.
happens when you pick up stuff from the forest floor.
Yeah, it does. So, we use a huge variety of methods to make sure that all of our different crops are uh, healthy and are able to sort of fend for themselves,
Hmm.
and as well as like to ward off insects and pests and other stress damage. And that starts with paying attention to the soil health. Every single year, at least once a year, we're testing our soil, and we send it to soil experts to help advise us on what amendments to put in the soil per crop. So even though we're growing over 40 different crops, we are getting recommendations from experts. And at this point, we're experts ourselves too. And so using our own experience to make really strategic soil amendment decisions, whether it's compost or using cover crops or adding organic fertilizers or all of the above, to make
Hmm.
sure that our plants are set up for health and nutrition before we even buy the seeds for the season. So that starts back in the fall. So last fall, for all of 2024's crops, we were already planning what's going where, sending the soil samples out, talking to our soil health professionals, and making what's called an integrated pest management plan, an IPM plan, to make
Hmm.
sure that each crop will not only be set up for success, but then when we encounter pests or diseases, or even before we encounter them, that we're set up to take quick, swift action to make sure that they are a really viable crop. So, for
Okay. What
example,
does, oh, good. You're going to give examples because I was kind
yeah.
of curious, like what ground cover means, like what, as a non-farmer, but as an eater of,
Mhm.
what you serve. I'm so curious, like how you make it happen.
Yeah, so for arugula, we have to put what's called a floating row cover on it in the springtime to exclude the flea beetle from putting holes in the arugula. Now,
Mm.
arugula is just deliciously tasty to flea beetles, and they also love the spring season. And so the floating row cover is a white blanket. It kind of looks like a white blanket. It lets
Hmm.
light through at about 80% transmission, and it also will let water through, that we irrigate generally under, so that just on the soil level to conserve water.
Hmm.
But the floating row cover will exclude all pests from going inside. So it's a woven fabric that's very tight and won't let even these tiny flea beetles through. And then the moment we take it off to start harvesting it, we have to put it right back on so that those flea beetles don't find it. We use floating row cover to also protect crops from frost damage.
Hmm.
But we use that. That's a really big, important tool in the organic farmer's tool belt to exclude pests without any sprays or anything like that. So we use it on squash to exclude the cucumber beetle until it flowers, at which point we have to take the floating row cover off because we rely on honeybees to pollinate. So
Pollinate,
we can't
sure.
get squash. Um, so we then are sort of open to potential damage from the cucumber beetle, which brings not only damage to the crop, but it generally also brings disease. So it's a double whammy of a pest. But what we do to make sure that we have a consistent supply of squash is that we'll plant a second wave of it, or another succession under floating row cover in a different location, so that by the time either the harvest is spent, the plant's really just given us as much as it'll give,
Hmm.
or it succumbs to pest or disease damage, we have a brand new crop right behind it that is protected, that had been protected.
Okay. So it's ready to go. And you said you do now year round. So
Yes.
how does that work? Like the ground's frozen right now. What does that mean? Do you have hoops? Like how do you make it work?
We currently have 9 greenhouses and high tunnels. So
Hmm.
those are like little plastic and steel houses.
Right?
So big steel hoops. They're each 100 feet long and 30 some feet wide. And we are able to grow in the ground in those, or in planters. So in one of our greenhouses, we have microgreens that are it's growing there all year round.
Hmm.
And then in the other ones, we have plants growing in the soil. So you can actually really extend the season, even though it's, a ridiculous 16 degrees outside right now.
Right.
Inside of those, because of the solar trap that plastic house gives the soil will retain that heat for long enough to not actually freeze. So inside
Mm.
these high tunnels, we have, nice kale and spinach and parsley, cilantro, dill, Swiss chard, collard greens, radishes, Hackeri turnips, carrots, all
So
sorts of
if
things.
they don't need, like, I think of like summer tomatoes. Like I think I know nothing, so I'm not pretending that I know anything. But I think, like, don't they need the heat of the sun to like help with their growth or whatever? but do these vegetables sort of need the sunlight, or do they just really, or not? Do you know what I mean? I know they need
Yeah.
some, but do you know what I'm saying? Like they can survive differently.
So they do and they don't. Most plants don't actively grow in the Persephone period, which is the period we're actually still in of really low amounts of daylight. So starting
Hmm.
in November, the
So wait,
Persephone.
I gotta interrupt you. That's from
Yeah.
Greek mythology, right?
Yeah.
Persephone, she like ate some pomegranate seeds, and then her mother goes crazy when she's gone for the winter, right? Isn't that the
Mhm.
story?
Yeah,
Okay.
and so that's when things don't grow. They don't really
Right.
actively grow, but we grow them to maturity before that period hits, and then we're
Hmm.
able to harvest from them year round. But they really don't put on a lot of active growing until after the solstice, and then it's very small amounts of growing. And like you were saying, it does kind of depend sometimes on how much sunlight we're getting. We don't get a lot of growth on cold, cloudy days. It's
Sure.
both just colder in the soil. So it makes the soil temperature too cold for the roots to want to move or to be able to move and grow.
Hmm.
And then the photosynthesis is lower. So we do stockpile. We try to get all of our winter greens planted in our high tunnels by September.
Okay.
So we're really taking a lot of tomatoes and summer crops out of our high tunnels early to prioritize winter crops in them. And then at
Hmm.
the same time, we do have a few techniques that we can employ outside in the fields to really keep additional greens going. So right now out in the fields, we do have Brussels sprouts and some kinds of cabbage as well that are really exceptionally hardy, and we'll be able
Hmm.
to harvest them throughout the winter. And then we have storage crops in our in our walk-in coolers. So we have things that we've already harvested. So butternut squashes and carrots and onions and shallots,
They
potatoes,
just
sweet
they can
potatoes.
be cellared and they last really
Yeah.
long, right?
Yep.
I just don't think people have a there is a misconception about fresh. Do you know what I mean? And people
Mm-hmm.
don't understand how hardy some of these vegetables are, and that they can be cellared, and that they can be eaten,
Yeah.
long after they're picked without losing really taste or flavor or nutrition, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's how storage crops were evolved. Apples are available year round, right? But they are harvested in September.
Hmm.
People are really used to apples. They're really used to onions, and onions are also harvested in the summer. So people do, we do get a lot of questions about the freshness of some of the storage crops that we're selling. And it's just like in the grocery store, they were harvested at their peak of freshness and kept with really strict conditions. So we have different walk-in coolers that have different temperatures and humidity levels
Hmm.
to make sure that we're keeping them in the best conditions possible.
Okay, so I want to go two ways because you're talking about keeping like at what point, so you have 70 acres now. So at what point did you build the facility to house the farm, and how did you go about doing that? Because it's a lot of money to start a farm. Do you know what I mean? And farming does not yield a ton of cash back. So how did you go about starting that, especially as a young mother?
For every single season of Moon Valley Farm, I've heavily invested our profits back into the farm infrastructure generally.
Hmm.
So Um, that's been a main way. I've sort of viewed our infrastructure investments as investing in the next season, as in the next season's security, especially in times of climate change like we're seeing now. Our high
Hmm.
tunnel infrastructure to me is security in the winter months as well as security in the summer months, and definitely security in the spring and fall months when we really don't know when to anticipate frost or the end of frost. So
Mm-hmm.
we can get started a lot more confidently and actually take on a lot fewer losses by prioritizing planting in our high tunnels. So anyway, I have invested each very strategically and sort of aggressively back into the farm every year. And that's been everything. For in the past 3 years, since I purchased this farm of my own after
Mm-hmm.
leasing land for 8 years, I really sought opportunities to get grant funding to help fund some infrastructure because I knew now I was really able to invest in infrastructure now that I have a farm of my own. And that was the main reason that I wanted to purchase my own farm, so that I could invest in this infrastructure, because it really is security for us. I say, come hail or high water, no matter what the weather is going to bring. And you just have no idea what to plan for, but I'm sure it's going to be either drought or deluge or hail
Right.
or
One or the other.
something. So either way, having walk-in coolers and high tunnels helps. So we've done everything from a cost share program through the county NRCS to help us invest in some high tunnels. They've helped us with 3 of them. To state resources like the organization Marbidco that helped us fund 2 of our walk-in coolers. And so we've looked for resources, we've put in our own money, and we've looked for ways to help as well. And shout out to my county, Frederick County, economic development, the ag section. They put some money for us too into it. One of the things is a backup generator, so it'll kick on to help our walk-in coolers if we lose power. So there's been a lot of opportunities that I've been able to utilize since purchasing this farm to invest in this infrastructure.
Well, I think a lot of counties that have the ability to have agriculture, recognize the value. I know Montgomery County has a huge ag tourism program, and I'm sure Frederick has something very similar, because the more people value the agriculture, I mean, it's better for the environment, and it's, better for everyone, animals and climate and how we live our lives. But getting the layperson involved in it and appreciating it, and then finding funding for it so that more and more people get into it, is so important.
Yep. Otherwise, it's going to go for development.
Right, exactly. No, I totally agree. Now, you became involved with the Governor's Ag Commission. Can you tell me a little bit about that and why you got involved?
Yeah, so the governor has representatives from each sector of agriculture. So from equine to grain to vegetable production to dairy. And I'm the organic chair for that. So I'm representing organic agriculture throughout the state. And that does include organic vegetables and herbs, like what I grow here. And then also organic dairy, organic grain, organic anything. So each chairperson gives a monthly report to the governor and to the other members of the committee. And that's both written and an oral report in person at the Maryland Department of Ag in Annapolis. And then sort of any important notes directly from farmers in the ag sector go to the governor to just stay informed.
And do you feel like that relationship is a lot of value? It really helps you, helps the other farmers, helps the other people in the business, but also helps the government sort of keep enough data to help you out?
So I used to be involved in some social justice organizations back in college, and I think that when you're trying to advocate for your cause, there's right channels to go down and there's or more effective channels to go down, and there's less effective channels to go down. Like
Hmm.
throwing up a post on social media might not be very effective because you're not actually reaching the people who have agency to make that change.
Hmm.
But for me, I felt like accepting this appointment was the right, more effective pipeline for change, because I had a direct pipeline where I could tell somebody who is making decisions about my business and organic agriculture and agriculture throughout the entire state. And
Hmm.
here I want to note that we're in an extremely important state because of the Chesapeake Bay. Being in the Chesapeake Bay watershed really, really matters. Um, and
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 it's
so
health matters,
yeah,
I mean, it really does. And I think and you can talk to this, but there's sort of this myth out there that like the Chesapeake is all better, but it's not.
no.
Obviously, I know, but so can we talk about that a little bit? I mean, people are probably like, you're a farmer. What does it have to do with the Chesapeake? But can you explain like why the health of the watershed means so much for you and what you do?
The Chesapeake Bay is affected by all our runoff, and that's
Hmm.
runoff meaning, anything that's not absorbed into the soil and ends up into a waterway, and all of our waterways end up ultimately in the Chesapeake Bay. So
Hmm.
agriculture is responsible for some amount. I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but some amount of that runoff. Of course, industry is, of course, homeowners are, of course, roadways,
Right.
etc. But agriculture is a huge portion of the runoff. And at the same time, in my opinion, we're some of the most prepared to mediate the runoff from everyone, because we know plants, we know how water moves, we are in charge of stewarding the land. And I think, especially because we're in such a delicate and important region, we're stewarding the land in the largest estuary in North America,
Hmm.
that is just such an important region. It should be much, much more diverse and feeding us really sustainably, much more than it is. And farmers have the ability to filter all of that runoff on our own properties, on the land that we're stewarding. So, for example, like one sort of obvious thing that farmers could do is plant plant around the waterways, right? So
Hmm.
create buffer strips of deep rooted grasses, bushes, and trees around waterways, which filter the runoff really naturally. So
Hmm.
it'll trap those things so that it doesn't make its way into the waterway, and then that'll create clean water. So it's
Sure.
we can use plants and animals to our advantage um, to really filter the waterways. And we, as stewards of the land, know how to do that better than anyone.
Okay, I love that. I mean, it's so important. And I think, like I've had oyster farmers on the show, hearing about these natural aquifers and how people can participate, whether you're composting or getting, bringing the shells to a drop off point, things of that nature. I think it's so important. Can we talk a little bit, because you have this farm, um, and this is not something you and I have discussed before, but what do you do about gleaning and like ugly vegetables and things that are totally usable, but maybe do have a little hole in them? What do you do with those? Because they're perfectly usable. They're just not pretty. So what do you do with all
We've done a lot of different things over the years.
that?
We actively sell seconds. So we have discounted prices for either individual portions or large volumes of produce seconds, and that becomes a larger number, especially when you're talking about our sweet potatoes or something that we've harvested tens of thousands of pounds of.
Right.
Um, and so we do that. That's one thing. But there's almost always extra. We have a ton of produce here all the time. So we work with a couple of different nonprofit organizations, including one that actually has Gleaning in its name. And we've donated, at least in 2023, we donated well over $30,000 worth of produce to that organization alone.
Wow.
To go to people who are food insecure. So we definitely try to avoid composting produce as much as possible. The produce that's edible, I mean, there's a lot of thirds or things like when tomatoes get an actual gash in it, it's not food safe anymore. So we'll compost things like that. But if anything is actually really edible and, we try to find a home for it.
What's the name of the organization?
It is, I don't.
It's okay, look it up. I'm very curious.
Yeah, so let me see.
Because I will tell you, I do work with with an organization called Food Rescue, and it's a organization that's run. It's not run by volunteers, but everybody who activate in it are volunteers. So every day I get a notification that's like, here are all the places that have stuff that can be picked up, and here's where you can take it. And people are like, oh, I'll do that. I'll do that. And it's just, they make it so easy to participate. Do you know what I mean? So you can stop at a bakery that has too much bread, or, the convention center has a bunch of platters, and then, you just drop it off at DC Central Kitchen, or you stop it out at one of the whoever will take it and use it. And it's so brilliant, and it's so necessary. Anything we can do to lower food waste is just so important.
It is. And actually, so the organization that I was referring to is called the Gleaning Project.
Okay.
And we also work with several other organizations. We actually just launched something that I'm pretty excited about, which is a donation subscription.
I love that.
So for $30 a month or $1 a day, right? Anyone can join this donation subscription, and we have 4 different organizations that the donations will be donated to. So we're working with the Linda Benn Foundation, who is getting food to food insecure families in PG County Title I schools. We're working with the Gleaning Project. We're working with Frederick Food Security Center and the Enoch Pratt. It's within their library. It's a free kitchen. I think it's called a fridge project, but it's going to transform from just a free fridge to an entirely free grocery store. So we have several people who have signed up, mostly our current CSA members, who have signed up to pay an additional $30 a month to get a box of this high quality organic produce to people who can't afford it. So in addition to donating, we're asking our community to also donate, because we want to increase our impact from what we can afford to donate, and to, to really getting some first, not just seconds or thirds quality produce to people, but getting that high quality produce to people who need it.
Well, do you mind sending me all that info? Because we'll put all of that in the list, areyouonit.com. So just the who, what, where, why, when. It's so exciting that you're doing that. Okay, we have a couple minutes left. So let's give the 411 on the CSA. And then I'd be hard pressed not to mention that you are in a bunch of restaurants. So that's like a total other revenue stream, and not an easy one, I want to add. So let's give the 411 on the CSA and how people can get involved or get it or be a part of it or learn about it, etc. And then let's just talk about how you got involved with restaurants.
Okay, great. So our CSA program is extremely flexible. It's a pay by the week. You get a small, medium, or large box. You can get a weekly box or a bi-weekly box. You can get veggies. You can subscribe to sourdough bread, eggs, gourmet mushrooms, microgreens, all sorts of things.
So is that aggregating from other farms?
Yep.
Okay.
In the case of the microgreens, we're growing them, but yeah, we have fruit from other farmers as well. So all farmers we know and trust that are in the region. And so you can also get everything a la carte in an online farmers market option. Our CSA program is also really flexible because we pre-pack the box and load it on every Thursday. And you have from Thursday to Sunday at midnight to make swaps in your box to make it more like what you want.
Cool.
So if there's Brussels sprouts in your box and your family hates them, you can trade it for carrots or spinach or something else so that you get more what you would like that week.
That makes sense. I love that. Okay. How'd you wind up in a chef's kitchen? Not easy. It's hard to break in.
It was 2013, so my second year in business, and I had an extra whole bunch of radishes. Like I was saying earlier, you just sometimes miscalculate how much of a crop to grow. And I had all these beautiful radishes. My CSA couldn't eat anymore. And one of the volunteers on my farm, so we were extremely volunteer run at that point, she worked at Woodbury Kitchen in Baltimore.
With Spike, sure.
Yep, of course. And so she said, well, let's harvest them, wash them, and take it over there and see if they can use them. And we agreed on a price. They purchased them, and that really started my relationship with selling to restaurants. I really enjoyed selling to restaurants because I didn't have to stand at a farmer's market. And at that time, I still had my 2 toddlers, and I could not figure out how I would have these, like, actually carry 2 children and man a farmer's market stand at the same time. So I would put the produce in my minivan, put the kids in there. They would hold the invoice, and I would carry in the veggies. So growing for restaurants really aligned with my passion too, for really specialty and unique veggies that I was growing. So they really liked all the cool herbs and all the odd veggies that I would enjoy growing.
And so then did you start, now you still supply to restaurants, correct?
Oh yeah, we sell to over 100 restaurants actually. It's a huge part of our business. I love selling to them.
I love that. That's amazing. Do they have requests? Do they say, hey, I really want, this kind of offering? I mean, listen, we can now buy microgreens. 10 years ago, the only place you saw a microgreen was in a restaurant. And now you sell them to the public and you can buy them more readily available. But are there certain things that you're like, that's a new one. I didn't know about that. I'll try that.
Well, there's a lot of new ones. And sometimes when we look it up, we say this really aligns with what we do. This looks delicious. We can grow it. It grows in our region. Yes, we can do it. We get requests for all sorts of things, and I can't say yes to all of them, but I say yes to as many that make sense with our growing system.
Sure. Okay. Name a couple of restaurants in DC, just so people know what we're talking about, because I know you have some Michelin star restaurants.
Oh, absolutely. So Oyster, The Dabney, Tail of Goat, Reveler's Hour, Machetto, Centralina.
All the big ones.
Yes.
Everybody.
So many. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Tell everybody, please, where they can find you, where they can find you online, where they can follow you on Instagram, all the things so they can stay up. And I'll wrap up when you're all done. But this has been very exciting. I'm very excited about that program you're doing with the CSA. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so you can find us on Instagram at Moon Valley Farm, on Facebook, facebook.com Moon Valley Frederick, and our website is moonvalleyfarm.net.
Excellent. And obviously you can find everything that Emma is doing at restaurants all around the DC metro area, and follow her. And of course, follow me at NYCCINELLIS, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Threads, all the things, because everything you heard here today, you will also find on the list, areyouonit.com. Tune into Foodie and the Beast every Sunday at 11 a.m. on 1500, or you can just click on the link and see us there. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. In next show, you'll see us at our new residency. It's a secret for the moment, but we'll be there shortly. Be safe out there and have a delicious week.
Produced by Heartcast Media.